Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tamara of Tamara Fashion Style. If this is your first time here, welcome back to my channel. Now, you might hear some noise in this background, but ignore the noise. My husband doing some work on the galvanize, and they choose this time of the day to do it with the sun very hot, so I don't know, so ignore the noise. Anyhow, as I said, welcome to my channel. Now, don't forget to hit that notification bell. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any video from me. Now today in this tutorial, I want to talk to you a little about um beginner sewing. All right, now I have some notes here that I wrote down so that I can remember, right, what I want to talk about, because I want to keep the conversation on point, right? So as you can see from the title of the video, from this title of this tutorial, it talk about sewing for beginners. Because sometimes I get a lot of question, right? That you're a beginner sewer and you want to know where to start. You don't know where to start. No, I was like you, right? I was like you. I was a beginner. I didn't know where to start. I get frustrated and so on. But since I was young, much younger, I always want to sew my own clothes and wear my own design. So I get into sewing and I'm just sharing what work for me. Now everybody different and different method work for different people. This is just my method. I'm just sharing with you with what work for me. Right? So the first thing as a beginner, right? Sewing for beginner. Now sewing is a fun project. Is a rewarding hobby, one, right? And you have to look at it in a sense, at least when you learn to sew, it could become a business for you, right? You can earn an income or a side hustle or a side change from learning to sew. So sewing is a fun, rewarding hobby. You can save money as well, right? You can save money from learning to sew. You can help create unique and personal items, right? You can help create your own style, your own personal item, right? Now, if you're a new sewer or a beginner sewer, right? If you're a beginner sewer or a new sewer, I have some tips for you. So let's get into the tips, what would help guide you along the way. And as I said before, sewing is a fun and rewarding project. All right, it's a fun, rewarding hobby. It could save you money. You can personalize your whatever you sew. First of all, you have to know what type of designer you want to be. It could be bag, it could be shoes, it could be a tailor, fashion designer, pillowcase maker, whatever, underwear, lingerie, nightwear. It depends on what type of designer you would like to be. So first of all, you have to sit down and realize which section your skill fall in. Which section would you like to invest in or would you like to get into, right? Don't just jump around the place. Well, today I want to be a tailor, tomorrow I want to be a fashion designer, next week I want to be a bag maker, the other week I want to be a shoemaker, the next week I want to be a pillowcase maker, the other week I want to be a sleepwear maker. Listen, sit down, find yourself, right? Find what you love. Do what you love. If you love designing and you love sewing, well then this video is for you. But if you don't love designing and you don't love sewing, it makes sense going into something or investing in something where you know you won't benefit from it in the end. You need to benefit from something. If you want to get into something, you have to get something out. Don't go into something where you are not getting nothing out, right? So for me, I always love sewing. I always want to design my own clothes, and I always want people to wear my design. So today I just sew for people, right? I get my income, my little income from it, and I am happy that people wearing my design. So if you're a beginner, here are some tips for you. Number one, you need to start with simple project. For beginners, I would advise you start with simple project. Choose simple project, right? That will allow you to learn basic sewing technique. Right? So when you choose these simple project and you start with a simple project, it would allow you to learn new technique, right? Such as maybe you can start with maybe a piece of fabric, like you can start with making a pillowcase. You can start with making like a tote bag, or maybe you can start by just maybe basic stitching. Now, when I start sewing, I didn't want to hear nothing about no pillowcase and bag and all this thing, because I am not, my type of myself, what I find myself is sewing clothes. So this bag maker and pillowcase maker, and look, I could buy a pillowcase in the store. I could buy a bag if I want, right? You have to find yourself. And I know for me personally, this pillowcase wasn't my thing. Pillowcase and sheet and these things have the people. That is not me. Bag, I want clothes. I want to sew clothes. Clothes that I could wear. Clothes that I could design. I could style. I could feel confident. Be myself. So find yourself. So start with a simple project. If you want to start with a simple project, for me, I didn't start with any. I start with cheap cloth, cutting cheap thing and practicing, right? So number one, you could start with a simple project. You could start with choose a project that would allow you the basic technique, such as maybe a pillowcase or a bag. It's all up to you. Okay, so you can start with a pillowcase or a bag. That's up to you if you want to start. Number two, you need to get the right tools. Now, sewing require the right tool, because remember, once you're going into sewing, you're going to end up going into designing. And as you get closer and you get to learn more, it's going to become a hobby to you, right? So, you have to get the right tools. You would need a sewing machine. Now, you can buy a simple sewing machine. When I start sewing, I start sewing on an old sewing machine that my husband have, and he still have that machine today. That's the first thing I start sewing on, is an old sewing machine my husband have. I when we got married, I saw him have that sewing machine. So from and since I was young, I always want sew my own clothes. So I start practicing on that sewing machine. And then I go and I learn to sew, but I only learn the basic because the woman that teach me, she had to go away. So I only learn to make a skirt and a dress and a top. I didn't learn color, I didn't learn buttons, I didn't learn how to hem. I just learned the basic because she didn't, when I start to go by her to learn the sewing, immediately she get married after, so she had to go away. But I still take the little knowledge that I get from her, and I still thankful today because of her I start off and I never stop. I keep going at it. I never put it down. So I start with that old sewing machine, and then I move up to a domestic sewing machine, a lightweight one. I start my first sewing machine that my husband purchased for me was a brother sewing machine. I still have that machine up to a day like today because I don't want to get rid of it because that is something dear to me. That is the first sewing machine my husband ever purchased for me. So start with simple project. Start with a sewing machine. You need to get the right tools. You need to get a sewing machine. You need to get thread. You need to get scissors. You need to get pins, right? And the most important thing, you need to get a measuring tape. Now, you may hear some noise in the background. Ignore the noise. As I said before, my husband doing some work on the galvanize, right? And now the sun is out, so this is the best time to do it. So ignore the noise. So back to our topic. So you'll need the most important, you would need a measuring tape. Now purchase a measuring tape that is both centimeter and inches, right? On one side, like this measuring tape, on this side here is inches, and you have the centimeter on this side. So purchase a look for a measuring tape that have centimeter and inches on the one tape. And you can start off with a 60-inch measuring tape. Don't go with this 120-inch. That would be very long. As gradually learning, you can expand your sewing tools. But all for now, you will just need a simple sewing machine. You just need thread, you need scissors, you need pin, you need measuring tape. You also want to invest in cutting shears. But for beginners, I would encourage you to buy cheap scissors for now until you get more advanced or you learn more, right? As you keep learning and you keep going on, you're able to invest in more expensive tools. Maybe for me, I use scissors. They have all kind of cutting tool out there. You got the rotary cutters, you have electrical scissors, you have cutting shears, but I purchase cheap scissors, and I have just a basic cheap scissors I have here, which I use. I have one for fabric and I have one for paper. So I buy two different color scissors. So I would know one color is for fabric, one color is for cutting fabric, and one color is to cut in paper. So you need to know the distinction between these two scissors. You need to know the difference. So don't buy the same color, buy two different. You can buy a red and a green, or an orange and a pink. You need to buy two different scissors, one for paper, one for fabric. So these are the tools you would need to have in your sewing kit. These are the more important tools you would need, especially for beginner. Number 3, you need to choose the right fabric. Now, this is an important factor when it come to sewing, right? You need to choose the right fabric. A lot of time we get caught up with the pretty fabric, the expensive fabric, and maybe we may see someone in a style that we love, and maybe we might go and look for the same fabric, and as a beginner we end up spoiling the fabric. Now, fabric is something you have to know to handle these fabric. For a beginner, you don't know to handle all the fabric, and for beginner you mightn't even know all the fabric. You might know the name of the fabric, you might know what this fabric make from, if it's natural, if it's synthetic, if it's whatever. You mightn't even know the names of fabric. You have numerous fabric out there with so many different names, right? So you have to take that into consideration, that choosing the right fabric. Now, when you're starting out, it's best to choose fabric like cotton, and flannel fabric. Right? Cotton fabric is a non-stretch fabric. It don't have any stretch, or you can use a piece of domestic fabric, like domestic fabric where they sew them, the designer them just used to drape. You can use like this domestic fabric, what you would use like for try out your design first before you cut your real fabric. So this is cheaper fabric. We call this domestic fabric. So this is the cheaper fabric, so you can learn on this. This fabric is not expensive. This is the non-stretch fabric, right? So you can use these for do your design. So choose the right fabric. Choose the right fabric for work from. Avoid, as I said, you can choose cotton, you can choose polyester, you can choose flannel, you can choose any fabric that cheap. You have sheeting, you have polyester, you have cheap fabric. You can even use a old sheet from you if you have, just to practice. You can use that to start. Now, the most important thing I would see beginner doing, especially those who now learning for sew, they may pick a big style that they can handle. Don't pick any big style that you can handle. Start with simple thing, as I said, like a pillowcase or a bag. You can start with that until you learn. Choose simple fabric. Avoid things like slippery fabric. Avoid things like stretchy fabric, right? And avoid these kind of fabric like double knit. They have a lot of knit fabric out there. Avoid these kind of stretchy and slippery and these thin fabric like chiffon and these things, especially for beginners. Avoid these kind of fabric. Avoid them until you have more experience. Now, when you have more experience in sewing and could handle these fabric, then you can go out and you can buy whatever fabric you want. Trust me and take what I'm telling you. When I was a beginner, I buy a lot of expensive fabric, and when telling you, it was a disaster, because remember, I didn't know anything about sewing. I see style, I see nice fabric, I just waste my money. So take it from me, that experience in years in sewing, buy cheap fabric, because even though I experience in sewing and in designing, I still make mistake up to a day like today. Any designer or any tailor or any seamstress, anybody that's sewing for years would tell you they still make mistake up to today. Any designer come and tell you everything is just smooth and they don't miss mistake. Well, I'm happy for them. But as a designer and tailors and sewers and seamstress and these people, we make mistake, even with fabric as well. And sometimes we may purchase a piece of fabric and maybe too slippery for us to work with it, too thin. We have to put batten, we have to pad it, we have to put facing, we have to line it. Sometimes we reach in difficulty too as the designer. So work with fabric like cotton, sheeting, polyester, flannel, non-stretch fabric, even an old sheet if you have. Avoid slippery fabric, avoid stretchy fabric, thin fabric. Avoid these things until you gain more experience. What you can do, you can practice practice your stitches, like you want to stitch straight, you want to stitch curve, you want to stitch however, zigzag, whatever. Practice your stitches before starting your project, right? So you can get on your sewing machine, practice your stitches before you start any project. Practice sewing maybe straight lines, making even stitch on scrap piece of fabric. So get your sewing machine. You can get a piece of fabric. You can draw some straight line on it. You can draw curve line. You can draw whatever circle line and practice stitching those line first. Practice with the straight one, then you go to the curve one, then you go to the zigzag one. You know, practice these stitches first before you start any project. You can practice it on a piece of scrap fabric. It costs you nothing to practice on a piece of scrap fabric. That's what I did. When I start learning in other sewing, like I go to different sewing classes, I would practice on sewing straight stitch, or even right at home I draw some lines on a piece of fabric and then I start stitching these lines. I draw the straight one, I go for the curve one, then I go for the zigzag one, then I draw some circle wrong and wrong, and then I stitch wrong those circle so that I can practice my stitching. Because stitching, you have to know to stitch straight, because if your clothes desire a half-inch seam allowance, an inch seam allowance, or 3/4 inch seam allowance, 5/8 seam allowance, you have to know these measurements. And you have to stitch these garments with this seam allowance. You can't stitch it inside the seam allowance because the garment's going to be too tight. If you stitch it outside the seam allowance, the garment's going to be too loose. So you need these to practice your stitching first. Okay? So there's number 4, you need to practice your stitching on a old piece of fabric or maybe some piece of scrap fabric. Number 5, follow the patterns. Now, when you're practicing on this scrap fabric, follow the pattern, right? Now, let's say as a beginner, you're using a pattern, because most people sometimes may just grab a sewing pattern and they may go on straight sewing, or they go on stitching up and they know anything. They just see a pattern, they just like it, and they just decide to go after it without reading, without looking. They just start sewing. Now, follow the pattern. If you're using a pattern, be sure to read the direction. You have to read the direction on this pattern paper carefully and follow every step of it. Now, if you come off track and you miss a step, trust me, it's disaster. So if you buy a sewing pattern, a commercial sewing pattern, and you want to sew from that commercial sewing pattern as a beginner, before you start cutting any project or any fabric or any pattern piece, get the pattern envelope, take a look at it thoroughly, carefully. Take a look at it, read through the requirement, read through the notion that it would require, read through every direction on that sewing pattern, and then in the sewing pattern it have a guide sheet for guide you along as you sew this garment step by step. Now you need to follow every detail and step of that guide sheet that they insert into that sewing pattern. So follow the direction step by step, so your project would be successful. Okay? Number 6, take your time. Now this does be most effective and the most important when it comes to sewing garments. You need to take your time, right? Sewing require patience and attention to details. That is the big, big, big most important, right? Patience and attention. You have to be patient with sewing. Now, sewing is a lot of work. Don't let no one or if anyone tell you or said to you that sewing is easy. It's not easy. Sewing takes a lot. Sewing takes a lot of mental, physical, emotional. It takes a lot. it's a lot of stress. Sometimes it's a lot of headache, especially sometimes if you get clients who don't care what you do, is like they are not pleased. Listen, sewing is a lot of stress and work. For me, I just always say anytime I go by anyone to sew my clothes, that I would pay them if whatever they charge, because it takes a lot out of you physically, mentally, emotionally, everything. It takes a lot. So it requires patience, it requires attention. You have to pay attention to every details when you sewing. And it takes a lot of time. Sometimes you stitch up a garment and sometimes you need to rip that whole garment. Sometimes you may put this whole garments up. And oh boy, because of one mistake that you're not paying attention or you're taking your time, you have to rip that whole garments down. Never do sewing in a rush. Rushing through sewing would cause disaster. Never go on a sewing machine if you don't feel like going on a sewing machine. Never go on it. Always be willing to go on your sewing machine. If a day you don't feel like sewing, or you don't feel like seeing a sewing machine, or you don't feel like seeing anything, don't go, because it would be a disaster. You would do it anyhow. You won't take your time. You won't pay attention. You would rush through the sewing process, right? So rushing through the process of sewing, or don't. Take your time. It requires patience, it requires attention, and no rush. Take your time. Patience have a big factor to do when it comes to sewing. Okay? So number 7, don't be afraid to make mistake. As I said before, I make mistake. Even though I in sewing for so many years, I make mistake. All of us make mistake. Tailors, designer, seamstress. You never watch project runway or watch maybe a sewing project with a group of people, and sometimes, even though we may be in this sewing business for so long, sometimes, oh boy, sometimes headache with a dress, or headache putting on a zip, or putting on a hem or button, or making buttonholes and these things. We make mistake as designer. So don't be afraid to make mistake, right? Mistake do happen, especially when you're just starting out. Mistake do happen. Remember, you just starting out. Remember, you don't know anything about sewing. Remember, you is just a beginner. So beginner sewers will make mistake. Don't expect your project to be perfect. Okay? You will make mistake. Mistake do happen, right? Mistake happen, especially when you're just starting out, as I said, right? So don't be discouraged if you have to rip out stitch and start it over again. Don't be discouraged. Rip it out and start over if you have to. Okay? It's a part of learning process. Right? That's what I learned. That's what they taught me. Ripping, putting back together is all a part of the learning process. So if you have to rip and you have to rip it out, tear it out, pick it out, whatever you have to do, and start all over again. That gives you practice. It would help you in your next project to correct the mistake that you make. So don't be discouraged. Don't feel bad if you make a mistake. Mistake do happen. We all make mistake. All right? Number 8, getting down to the 2 final. Number 8, I would encourage you to join a sewing group. That's what I did. They had a sewing program was going on, a 6-week sewing program, and I joined that sewing program. I joined the beginner sewing program. Even though I get a little of the beginner, I still go back and I join the beginner sewing program. Then I go to the advanced sewing program. Then I go to the intermediate sewing program, and then I move on and I do designing, dress design, and learning to design styles and clothing. All right, learn to design them, style line and the princess line and colors. I move on, I keep at it, and I keep going until I learn to design, and I take classes, I take online school, everything. Right? So they have online school you can take and learn to design, learn to do fashion designing, learn to do dressmaking and designing. They have online classes you can do. So join a sewing group, take a online class, join a sewing group or taking a class. It could improve, right? It could improve your sewing skill, right? It could improve your sewing skill. It can support guidance and inspiration as you learn to sew. So if you join a sewing group, or maybe you join an online class, you could be confident. It would give you more guideline. They would help you to guide you along. You would get more inspiration, and you would learn, right? You would learn to sew. So I would encourage people to join a sewing group. Join a group, take online classes, and practice, right? I take a lot of online classes. I'm telling you today, I in regret taking those classes, because sometimes we may think we know a lot until when we see how somebody else do it. And for me, seamstress, designers, tailors, we always learning. We never stop learning, because remember, new inspiration, new design, new techniques, everything keep coming out every day. There's a new style, a new looks, a new everything keep coming out every day. So for designers, they never stop learning. So go and join some sewing group, take online classes, practice. You understand? It would be able to give you guideline, inspiration, and you'd be able to learn from these sewing group and learn from these online sewing class. Right? You can watch maybe videos and things like that. Now, last but not least, the most important thing you need to remember is that sewing is a skill. Right? Always look at sewing as a skill, as something new that you want to learn. So don't just look at it as, I just want to learn sewing because I see this person have a nice dress because I like this dress, or I see this person with a nice skirt, or I just want to sew because I see my neighbor sewing. Or listen, sewing, you have to remember, always remember this one thing. Sewing is a skill, right? That takes time and practice to master. Always remember that. Once you go with that attitude and try to practice that attitude, and when you're learning to sew, always have that reminder in mind. Remember that sewing is a skill, right? Sewing takes time, patience, and practice to master. Always remember that. Now, as I said before, don't get discouraged if your first few projects don't turn out perfectly. Don't get discouraged, because remember, sewing take practice. It take time. It take patience. So don't get discouraged if your first project, right, ain't come out right. Because all of we first project did not come out right. All you need to do, right, is keep at it. Keep at this sewing. Keep practicing. Be patient, and be observant. Be thankful. Sewing is all about ideas. How you want to see yourself. What style you want to see yourself. And this could only happen when you master these skills. So always remember that sewing is a skill. It takes time, it takes patience to master. So never get discouraged if you see your first project in turn out properly or it did not perfect. Just keep at it, and when you keep at it, in closing, when you keep at it, remember this: when you keep practicing and be patient, and when you keep at it, soon you would see yourself creating beautiful, right, and fundamental item. Yes, once you keep at the practice and keep at the sewing, you would start creating beautiful and fundamental clothing, beautiful design, beautiful clothing, neat clothing. You would want to know where you getting these ideas from. Sometimes you may just watch a style and you could design it. It's all about idea, but it's a lot of stress. It takes a lot mentally, emotionally, physically. It takes a lot. Measurement, you need to get the measurement correct. In my next episode, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about measurement and measuring the body. So this is just a little tips I want to give to beginners who want to learn to sew, or who is now a beginner. So I give you 9 steps on how you can start as a beginner. So I hope I was able to make this video helpful for you. If you want to see more video like this and you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel. Please leave your comment down below, and I will see you. So thank you for watching, and I'm happy to have you, and thank you for coming back to my channel. So I will see you in my next video. You take care and you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.